What's Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown actually like? I've played for just under 40 hours in just over the month since the game released, reaching as far as level 42 out of the maximum level of 60. So after the first month or so of this game, what do I think of it? Throughout today's video I may mention other open world racing games, but you need to remember that Test Drive is from a much smaller studio and that it was sold at a much lower price point. Let's wind all the way back to the game's release to begin with. I had pre-ordered the Gold Edition, as a lot of people had done, only to find that the game wasn't exactly playable during the early access, which is part of what we paid extra for with that version of the game. Anyway, to begin with, early access wasn't even recognised by Steam, which is where I've been playing it, until it was fully restarted, which to be fair isn't the game's fault, so let's not worry too much about that. However, when the game finally did download and installed, it was slow to look for the servers before deciding it couldn't connect, and being an always online game, this meant you couldn't play it at all. Eventually, when it stopped failing completely, it would then put you in a queue to play, which could take forever to get to the top of, at which point you may be disconnected anyway. This has been an issue with a lot of recent games, to be fair, but not all of those have been online only, so at least we were able to play some parts of the game, even while the servers weren't working. They have since then promised some kind of in-game compensation for this, however they won't confirm what it is, or actually give it to us yet. Whatever it is though, in-game compensation is purely virtual. I kind of feel like as part of what we paid extra for was the early access, that we should receive some kind of partial refund to cover the days that nobody could play at all. It does though all seem to be fixed now, for me at least, on PC in European servers, although it would seem that there are still some major issues for some players. Online only was, and always is to be fair, a terrible decision, particularly given how unreliable the servers have been. If you're going to do that, you need to make sure that they're flawless, otherwise these kind of issues ensue and everyone complains, and, well, you get to the situation that we're in now. This highlights why games shouldn't require an online connection to let you play. If the servers are down, you literally can't play the game, not even the single player parts, which is doubly annoying because only once or twice have I actually seen another player in a race with me. The game also isn't cross-platform, which a lot of them aren't, but it's still kind of a pain, and there's a region lock for some reason, which is one of the most ridiculous restrictions that I've seen in a game, because it kind of means that now, at the moment, in 2024, with mods, I can play the original Test Drive Unlimited and Test Drive Unlimited 2 online with somebody in a different region, but I can't play the brand new game with somebody in a different region. Having said that, if the servers were broken, even with the regions and platforms split, can you imagine the chaos if cross-region and cross-platform was there and we're all on the same... Yeah, that would be even worse. So, the cars, arguably the most important part of a car game. There are just under 100 cars in the game at launch, and there's a pretty good variety to them. One thing that there's a problem with is I don't really think there are enough new cars. There's rather a lot of cars in the game that were in the previous title back in 2012, which is kind of nice. It's kind of nostalgic to have those in there, and there's some really cool cars, like the Mercedes SLS AMG, and the huge V12 diesel Audi Q7. But I feel like less of these old cars and more new stuff should really have been in there, especially in quite a small car list. One of the best things about this game, though, is the car's audio. The sounds are absolutely incredible, they all sound very unique and different to one another, and it just feels like they've put a lot more effort into this than the competition do with car sounds in their games. The experience of buying vehicles in a dealership is certainly still there as well, although the dealerships do feel a bit too large and empty, and all a bit too similar in style to one another compared to how it felt back in Test Drive Unlimited 2. As for the campaign, when it finally actually let me play it, I found the races a little bit disjointed, to be honest. They seem to just sort of be a way to earn XP to level up and then continue with the game, rather than being a coherent championship like you would find back in Test Drive Unlimited 2. Although they really don't actually give you much XP at all. The money, though, isn't too bad, although the cars are astronomically expensive, or they seem that way because I think the currency is supposed to somewhat resemble Hong Kong dollars. I have so far reached level 42, and the maximum level at the moment is level 60, so I haven't yet had to repeat any races, but I have retried some of them just to achieve some slightly better results. At the moment I've gained most of my XP and levels from exploration, mostly road discovery, but there's only so many roads that you can discover, so it would seem that later in the game you will need to repeat races for XP, which in itself wouldn't be a problem. However, XP reduces each time you complete a race, which I'm led to believe makes it become a bit, well, a massive grind to get anywhere once you reach the higher levels if you've already gone and done the exploration, which you will have done because it's the best way to level up and probably the most interesting thing to do in this game. The AI also has no difficulty adjustment, they just sort of get more difficult as you progress through the levels. They are, though, at times slightly incompetent, unless it's raining, and then they're completely incompetent for some reason. The physics, handling, and general feel of a game can be very subjective, but this is what I think. I find the game very intuitive and pleasant to drive. The cars have a good feeling to them and are quite progressive. They don't snap weirdly or make you overcorrect like I find that they kind of do with the slightly loose feeling of a Need for Speed game or the Crew game, for example. They are, however, quite away from feeling as good or, I think, realistic as Forza Horizon, though, which is really the benchmark for open-world racing games. Although I have played that game a lot, so it may just be that that's what I'm used to, so it's not really an entirely fair comparison. But yeah, the game feels pretty good. I would say it's more towards that of a Forza Horizon than that of a Need for Speed or Motorfest, but it sits somewhere in between. One of my favourite parts about this game is the map. It's really good, although that's mostly down to Hong Kong Island being a beautiful location, rather than the map design, as it's basically a one-to-one replica in scale, but with some creative license applied, as they did with the previous titles, to kind of tweak little bits. It's not 100% accurate, but it's the right scale. The developers have done a good job of turning that island into a playable map, though, that fits together nicely and with a scattering of creative license, like I said, for example replacing the horse racing course with a racing oval, and adding the hotel and the dealerships around the island. Rather excitingly, a small part of Ibiza will also be returning to the series very soon, which was of course a location in the previous title. However, they've completely rebuilt some of the island to add in one of the first major updates that should release later this year.
In 200 meters, turn right. Turn right.
Although the game's optimization still needs a lot of work, particularly with the graphics, I think it looks decent enough. I'm playing on PC though, and on console it apparently looks a whole load worse, but with a 3090, to give you some context on my machine, I'm able to run it in 4K on medium settings and still maintain over 50 FPS for the most part, or more like 40 FPS if I'm also recording at the same time. There have of course been many comments about it looking like a mobile game or a PS3 game, and yes, it's by no means the most beautiful game out there, and in a lot of places it doesn't really look up to the quality of other modern racing games that are out at the moment, and some areas really don't look good. One of the most noticeable issues with the graphics is the lighting, I would have to say. It just generally looks a bit off, and there don't really seem to be enough shadows, and other weird things happen, like often the edge of water glows slightly. However, if you are in the right location at the right time of day, it can look rather incredible, but yeah, there are quite a lot of times then it doesn't. Also, if we're honest, The graphics were never really what made a Test Drive Unlimited game great. It was the cars and the general feeling of the title, so although they're not up to the level of other current racing games, this isn't necessarily a problem, but there are quite a lot of other issues with the game. Because, yes, apart from, obviously, the major issues with servers and not connecting, there are a few other problems, mostly pretty minor, but again, as we were just talking about graphics, sometimes things like the edge of the water seems to glow slightly, and, well, other things go wrong. Traffic cars randomly despawn sometimes, which can be quite amusing, actually. So these, compared to the bigger issues, aren't really a problem, especially when compared to the connection, because that means you can't play the game at all, which is a bit of an issue, really. But yeah, there are also other things that have gone wrong. The game kept forgetting my discovery of certain dealerships in certain areas, so I had to drive to them again every time I got into the game, but this was quickly picked up and has been rectified in the game's first major update, along with supposedly over 300 other bug fixes. Although for the first week after this update, the servers seem to be almost permanently under maintenance, but I think this isn't any longer the case. As I'm sure you are aware by now, there are no houses in the game, just the Solar Hotel, and some of the other things that previously had their own locations, such as the cosmetic surgery and the clothes store, are now all residing in this one central Solar Hotel building. They have said houses are something they would like to add, so I think it is very likely they certainly have plans to add them, but it's not 100% guaranteed, I don't think, still. And if they do come to the game, it won't be for another couple of years, I don't think. So hopefully they'll be continuing to update it by then. It's all a bit up in the air at the moment because, well, they've had so many fewer sales than they're expecting, and I don't think as many people will be spending money on the Solar Pass as they're expecting, so we'll have to see what happens. There also isn't a casino in the game at launch, as originally promised. That, though, is coming soon and is very much confirmed, although, like I say, given that there was so much more issues to fix post-launch than anticipated, I wouldn't be at all surprised if the planned updates are delayed. They haven't said that yet, so we still expect that pretty soon, hopefully. So there aren't that many cars, the campaign is very disjointed. Despite being an always online game, you barely ever see anyone else in the races. The graphics at times fall quite a way short of what a modern game should achieve, and there are far too many issues, and particularly with the servers, to count. It also has slightly missed feeling like a proper Test Drive Unlimited game. A lot of the elements are there, but we can't ignore the absence of houses, and the dealerships don't quite have the same feeling as they did back in the previous title. Having said all of that, so far I've still really enjoyed my time playing this game, although I'm not sure how much more there is for me to do now, or once I've completed the remaining kind of 15 or 20% of roads that I haven't driven and discovered the wrecked vehicles. The races aren't all that entertaining, I don't think, so not really sure what I'm going to do after that. The car collecting feeling of older Test Drive Unlimited games is still somewhat there, and it is nice to have a new map to drive around that I have to say is an incredible location to explore, and exploring Hong Kong Island has been my favourite thing to do in this game so far. However, and I hate that this is my final conclusion, because I absolutely love the Test Drive Unlimited series, and I'd have liked to see more games coming in the future, but given how incomprehensibly bad the servers have been, preventing people from playing at all because they took the decision to make it online only, and all of the other many flaws and faults that this game has, I can't really sit here and say that it's a good game, or that you should spend actual money on it. Not in its current state, anyway.